Hello, my name is Phil. Let's talk about movies. Today we're launching our coverage of the BFI London Film Festival 2021. It is the 65th festival for BFI. We were down on South Bank recently. Here is Sean Vickers.
I was dancing on the South Bank. I was thrilled. There were posters. It felt very real. There's an in-joke that we're not going to tell you about that involves printers.
Oh, yeah. Not a great start to the festival this year.
We're just going to leave that there. We're not going to dwell on the fact at all.
We might share it at the end, maybe, of the coverage.
At the end, it'll have passed, and we can laugh about it. But right now, #printers.
So today's movie that we are discussing is a British drama, a romantic drama, I think, but not in a slushy sense. No sex in this movie, though, bizarrely, which I
quite like that.
Odd. Do you? Quite refreshing?
I'll come back to it. You know, we talked about a film a while ago with Alison Steadman in it.
I was thinking of that earlier.
And you'll remember it had a really awkward, dreadful sex scene.
Yeah.
And there was a moment in this film, Ali and Ava, where I was like, it's going to be now, isn't it? And they didn't do it.
So it's a British drama, Ali and Ava. I was very much looking forward to seeing this because it stars two of my favourite actors. Adeel, Akhtar, who's brilliant in Back to Life.
Clio Barnard has a lot of features often set in the north. I'm from the north, so I'm celebrating that. Dark River, The Selfish Giant, and The Arbor, all set in the north of England. This is no exception. This is set in Bradford, which is in West Yorkshire.
So you were born in Sheffield. You grew up in Sheffield, right?
South Yorkshire, yeah.
So you know that area, the general area, that kind of feeling of the north, you know, the weather. The weather's not great, is it?
We talked about this, actually, didn't we? We talked about this because you were like, where is it? And I was like, it's definitely in West Yorkshire. And my guess is, and I hadn't read the blurb, that it's in Bradford.
Yeah.
Which it is. It's filmed in Bradford. It is a love story. It's a gentle love story. It's not as bleak as her previous work, and really follows the story of Ali and Ava, who meet at a school. Ava is a primary school assistant, and Ali is like a face in the neighbourhood, and he helps the kids in the neighbourhood. He is a landlord, and some of the tenants have kids, and he's very supportive. He's very much part of the community, and they meet at school, and this romance kind of ensues.
Yeah, so we should say Ava is played by Claire Rushbrook, one of the other favourite actors of mine, and, brought to my attention, her first film, I think, was Secrets and Lies, Mike Leigh. I'm a massive Mike Leigh fan. She's done a lot of things, recently since, a lot of TV work as well, but I just think she's brilliant. And I didn't know, actually, until today, that she was in Spice World, the movie. There you go. Completely different vibe.
If you were to poke around on Claire's IMDb, it's one of her highlights.
I know, and Ammonite, we saw that recently as well.
Oh, yes,
I think that was last year, wasn't it, at the London Film Festival?
And she did that thing that was on Netflix, Enola Holmes. She's done quite a few things, some of much interest, and Adeel Akhtar.
He's brilliant. Can we talk about that initial meeting? Because you say that, the scene where they do get to know each other. For me, it felt like they'd known each other before for years. They felt very familiar. I don't know whether that was a flaw in the film or not, but it just seemed like I'd missed a bit. It was like, oh, okay, so they do know each other quite well. Maybe they just hit it off.
No, I think there's something about northern working class culture. I'm not going to make massive statements, but that's the world that I come from. It's a kind of warm, at times over-familiar way that people interact with each other. It's very chatty, very warm. Yeah. And I think that's what you get, which is like, it's not standoffish, it's not cold, it's not aloof. So I think that comes through. I think that's actually quite natural. And yeah, it made me smile a bit. I think that's how Yorkshire is for me, really. Like, it's, and I think the way that they interact and the way that they meet, may feel a bit over-familiar if you're outside of that universe. But for me, it felt quite normal.
So their families, their setup's quite different. He's obviously a British Asian living in Bradford. His family's quite well off, but he's also, that DJ that feels like he needs to have that as a career. So it feels like he's in the wrong job, even though he feels quite comfortable. That's his passion, music.
Yeah, he's a British South Asian man. Clearly, there's some wealth in their family. Ava is from an Irish Republican background, so very different. There's an interesting interplay between how where they feel comfortable in the spaces they feel comfortable in. It's quite interesting. There's a bit where Ava's first husband was Indian and her father was cool with that because her father hated the British.
Yeah.
And then Ava's second husband was the National Front. You've got all of this mix. I said this to you after we watched the film. I was like, everyone's in it together. That's what you realize. You don't see that when you're in that. You're like, at one point, one of Ali's nephews goes, "Oh, you're seeing that woman? She's a gory chav," which means she's a bit of like whatever. And it's slang, but that's two sides of the same city or two sides of the same town, basically, but they're all still in the same mix, and it's that perspective that sometimes is lacking.
There's obviously the cultural differences, but they've got those similarities as well, and obviously Ava's family aren't so well off as Ali's family, but there's a brilliant scene where they're in the car and they're talking about music, because they've obviously got that passion that they share, and they're talking about punk, and they're singing to a punk track on the radio, and they have that connection instantly. But then she says that she's into folk music, and he's like, "Oh God, no! I just hate folk music." There's that brilliant kind of connection, but also the fact that they've got that sense of humour that they can actually take the piss out of each other a little bit.
It often happens when you meet someone, you're quite open to like, oh, you like something different, you like a different type of movie or a different type of film or music or whatever, and that rubs off on you, and you see this as part of their kind of like, as the flame ignites between the two of them, this kind of openness about his passion for like EDM and dance and banger, and her passion for kind of folk and country, and how it starts to kind of cross over, this pollination, which I think is really nice, because it's a very subtle way, or maybe not so subtle even, about how their relationship is moving forward. The music is rubbing off, the music is representing something, and I like that.
I've got a question for you, Sean. Have you ever had the urge to stand on top of a car with headphones on, dancing to your favourite track in the middle of a field where there's no one around? Just to let the pressure off.
No, I don't know if I've ever even done that. I might have done that.
Have you never done that? Dancing on top of the car?
I haven't more recently, but I would never rule it out.
I quite like the idea. I mean, there's a scene where you see him doing that, and it kind of like, it's that thread throughout the film, isn't it? That's how he lets off pressure.
Yeah, he's processing in a way, and that's why, like, as you say, because he runs these. He's basically a benevolent landlord. I think, it doesn't suit him well. He has this kind of like, his escapism is like his little man cave that he has. He has all his records and he creates his music. And I find that's his escapism from this kind of world that's surrounding him. And he's a relatively straightforward person, He's quite happy. He's quite open. There's some scenes where like he goes into a different neighborhood where clearly there's some like, some tension, and he's very good. He kind of mitigates it, and he gets everyone. He gets all the kids involved, and he's a people person, at his heart. And basically, like the story of Ava and Ali, two people that really shouldn't be together but are, and it's more about how more people are more in common than they are different.
And there's a lot of depth as well. I mean, there's a fair bit of depth in the story, because Ava's obviously a widowed mum. Her late husband was a bully as well, so she'd been in a previous abusive relationship, and obviously he's not around anymore, but that's obviously also rubbed off on her son Callum, who's played by Sean Thomas. You see the son becoming quite aggressive with Ali, as
she describes. I mean, she had a violent relationship with her second husband. It's quite clearly in the National Front. Some of that, I think, has influenced her son to some extent. But the big thing there is the fact that the son is still grieving for this individual. And so therefore the individual is almost, infallible because of his feelings that he has. And there's some very touching and deep moments around revelation from Ava during the course of the film.
I mean, the canvas is, I was going to say it's quite drab, but in a way it's not, because there is that balance where it feels quite optimistic, even though what they're dealing with, the characters are dealing with a lot of grief and a lot of darkness. It does feel like the characters are trying to deal with a lot of darkness. And the weather is it's always raining, it's very overcast. It feels quite ominous. The mood of the film feels quite ominous, but the characters bring that lightness.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're spot on there, Phil. Like the location influences the mood very much so. The way it's filmed, the time of year it's filmed, it does follow a classic story arc. I think the components are interesting, and it plays with things that happen at grassroots level. It's how people are interacting, and how as I mentioned earlier, like what should be straightforward isn't, and how things form and grow, and how people make decisions, and what that's based on, and legacy. And there's a lot of stuff there. It's really grounded in something which is basically just an estate in Bradford, but there is so much going on.
I think people are definitely going to compare the mood of this film to something by Ken Loach or maybe Mike Leigh, but I think there are differences. I think especially with Mike Leigh, I think Mike Leigh has a lot of comedy actually in his writing, and also the character development. I think, you know, you do see a lot of the humour in his characters in his films, even though people do say, you know, constantly that his films are quite depressing. I don't agree with that. I don't think there's so much comedy in this, although obviously there are some comedic moments, but it's not like caricatures. You know, in Mike Leigh films, you do, in a sense, see caricatures of some of the characters in his films.
Their situation isn't the key character here. It's not that they are working class or even like benefit. It's none of that. It's just the background. It's a context with which these two people are falling in love. And so it adds a richness to it that you can't ignore, but it's not the central character. So no, I quite like the movie.
Yeah.
And you know, my usual, you can take 20 minutes off. I was okay with it. It's 1 hour, 34 minutes. It did follow a classic story arc. I liked Ava and Ali. I warmed to them as people and protagonists and characters. And I would certainly recommend this movie.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a competent piece of filmmaking. I think obviously the writer-director knows what she's doing, and that really does come across. And obviously the performances are fantastic. You know, overall, I think all the actors that are in this, not just the two leads, but for some reason, I just felt like I didn't really know the characters that well. And I don't know whether that's because the film was so short. Maybe if we'd had an extra 15 minutes or so, there could have been more of a development with the characters. There was obviously...
They're words that are never going to leave my mouth, Phil.
I know, well, you obviously want it trimmed, but, you know, it's
15 more minutes.
Yeah. I think I wanted it to be a little bit longer, just for that reason.
Maybe we're going to agree to disagree here, Phil, because I think I knew the characters. I think I knew what they were trying to do with the device. Yeah, they weren't as deep as you could take them. You know, what we haven't talked about is that, you know, Ali is separated from his wife.
Oh, yes.
He was at university. And it's interesting about when he starts to change, how she starts to perceive him. Because I think she's a bit like, I'm at university, I'm doing my course, I'm trying to better myself. It kind of rekindles something for her as well about the individual that she was with. And I found that really interesting. And I think that could have been explored a bit more. I think it was suggested. You know, like he comes on and he's playing Dylan. And she's like, oh, I didn't know you were into Dylan. And there's all these things which suddenly seem like, I think she's a bit like, oh, I know this guy, this is who he is. And I think she surprises him. He surprises her, sorry, and shocks her a little bit with some of these things, you know, like, you know, he is a very open book.
I thought that was really effective because, you know, a lot of us have been in that situation where, you know, you've split up with someone, yet you're still living in the same house. It can be very heartbreaking because you still care for that person, even though romantically you're not together. And when you're living under the same roof, you still kind of want to make things work, which obviously in Ali's case is what happens. He's, you know, still in love with her, I think. I enjoyed it. It didn't blow me away as much as I thought it would, as much as I hoped it would, because obviously with the two actors that I love, they did a great job. I think the writer and director did a great job. But again, going back to what we said before, it was a story that I'd seen before. So, star rating for Ali and Ava for Boys on Film, 3 stars for me. Was that 3 hours? 4?
For me. 3.
It's that solid hand again.
It's a solid 3. Put your hand away. It's a solid 3. And as people that regularly will watch, I'm quite a hard marker.
Yeah.
So I think solid 3.
Yeah. So let us know if you're thinking about going to see this at the BFI London Film Festival. I think it's out at the beginning of next year in the cinemas for everybody to see. If you don't catch it at the London Film Festival. And if you are new here, by the way, we are covering the film festival for the next 3-4 weeks or so, because it starts on the 6th of October, running till the 17th. And we're going to be there.
We're just pottering around, you know, being cheeky and seeing some early showings. Also, if there's anything you want us to talk about, you know, there's a lot of film this year. As we said in our promo, the brochure is a very thick one. So if there's something that you'd like us to keep an eye on or to talk about, then do let us know. And we can endeavour to fulfil your wildest dreams.
Absolutely. And I'd like to think that we're going to get to actually chat to some of these filmmakers too. It'd be great to interview some of the directors, some of the cast. You know, there are going to be some red carpets. Hopefully we can attend some of those.
Not going to wear a sweater to the red carpet for maybe I will.
Good to see you, Sean. Thanks everybody for watching. See you on the next one.
Bye.